Hello, great souls. Welcome to Living Yoga Satsang. Let's begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Guide us in our time together as we study and practice these yogic teachings. Help us to awaken to the grace within them, to receive thy living presence in our lives, to feel supported in all that we do, and to awaken to our own divine nature. May we share with all the gifts that we have received, for we are a part of all that is. Guide us moment by moment to awaken in thee. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, so today we're looking at the third yama, which is non-stealing. It's also known as Ashteya. And we'll be referring from the Raja Yoga book. I'm also going to read a little bit from the Bhagavad Gita that talks about this. And as with the other satsang talks, what we're looking at with the yamas is really how do we practice these in daily life, and what do they offer us as a way of, with the yamas, what we're doing is that we, Master Yogananda said that we're plugging up the holes of the container, of our container, our energetic container, so that the grace that is in us and the grace that comes to us and through us doesn't dissipate, it doesn't leak out. So the yamas plug up the holes, and these are ways in which thought and consciousness and behavior that weakens us, right? It weakens our energy, it weakens our consciousness, and it weakens the grace within us and flowing through us. So with, as with all of the yamas and niyamas, we look at the obvious application of non-stealing, and then we look at the subtle application of that and how that shows up in our life. So the obvious application of non-stealing is not taking what doesn't belong to us, not taking what is someone else's. And as we progress spiritually, as we grow spiritually, we learn and we become to, we move away from that obvious behavior. Pardon me. So one of the things that Yogananda said is for all of us, for the soul that's on this journey of remembering our divine nature, we have, Yogananda said, we've done everything. So if we have a disinclination for stealing in this obvious sense, if we feel like, oh no, we repel from it, right? It means we've tried it and we've realized it's not a good thing to do. So it's, it absolutely does weaken us, and it's not in line with our highest self. So when we look at non-stealing, and a more subtle form of non-stealing is non-coveting. So not coveting what isn't ours. So maybe I've progressed to I don't take it, but I sure wish I had it. That would be coveting. Oh, I'm looking at that, I'm longing for something that belongs to someone else, which is different than maybe something I could have. We'll look at that, talk about that. But coveting someone else's property. And that's the more subtle form of non-stealing, that we don't, even in our thoughts and in our consciousness, indulge in that, because it's an indulgence and it can really get us into trouble. And it is actually a form of stealing. So that's a little bit more subtle. When we go further into the yama, which guides us to our own divine reality, our soul nature, we are one with this infinite universe, and we don't need to steal. We don't need to steal, we don't need to covet, we don't need to look outside ourselves for fulfillment. And that's what stealing or coveting is about, is thinking that over there is my happiness. If I had that, then I'd be really happy. And again, I'm going to differentiate between, I'll talk about a partner in this moment. Maybe there's a longing for a partner, which was definitely something in my life. I really wanted a soul partner. And so there can be the wanting of a soul partner, and there can be, I want your partner. Like, well, I don't just want a soul partner, I want a partner someone else already has. And that can happen, right, easily. So it's looking at the practice of non-stealing and non-coveting is, even if something let's say this, because we're talking about abundance, right? The perfection of non-stealing is that state of abundance. Patanjali says all of your needs, wealth in fact, flows to you easily, and all of your needs are met easily. And if you think about that state of consciousness of abundance, there's a quality of ease and open receptivity. There's a story, it might have come first from Yogananda. I heard Swamiji, in the world of Ananda, I've heard this story a few different times, where the story is that this man goes to heaven, and he's being shown around heaven, all these different places, and he's shown to this one large warehouse that's filled with treasure. They can't believe it. Like, wow, what's this, right? And in there is this particular very fancy car. So I've heard it described as different, but it could be your version of a very fancy car. And he is drawn to that especially, and says, first off, what is this place? And St. Peter's guiding him around. And he said, oh, this is the place of rejected gifts. He said, rejected gifts? Yeah, the gifts God was wanting to give to people that they rejected. And he thought, even that car, someone rejected that car. I said, well, it's interesting you noticed that car. That was your gift. He couldn't believe it. He said, what do you mean? He said, well, when you were praying, you needed a car, and you were praying very specifically for a car that was not that fancy car, right? So whatever car it was, and again, your version of a car that wouldn't be all that fancy, he was specifically asking for a car that was this, okay car. And so God said, oh, all right, well, then I'll give you that car. And the idea is that we limit ourselves by constricting, attaching rather, to a concept of fulfillment. Feeling like, oh, if I had that. And again, ultimately the fulfillment is the flowing grace of our own highest self, of the divine energy, this cosmic conscious energy moving through us, our awareness and awakening that we are children of the universe. We are divine in our nature. And so there's this expansiveness of consciousness that happens when we're practicing non-stealing, because we're practicing, and in the beginning, it very often is a sense of practice. In our material realm, I would say we are bombarded by the message that external things deliver happiness and fulfillment, and without them, we have less. So we're bombarded with the message of coveting. We're encouraged to covet that which is not ours. And it doesn't have to necessarily belong to someone else, but we are definitely encouraged to feel that we're lacking something if we don't have something. So when we're looking at this practice of abundance, it can feel distant. It can feel like, all right, I'm going to try it on. And in some ways, it can feel like I'm going to pretend. I'm going to pretend that I don't need anything. Later, we'll be talking about the Niyamas and one of them is contentment. And contentment is that when it is realized, we are realizing that state of well-being. That is good, right? We feel good. So non-stealing and non-coveting is tapping into a sense of fullness and abundance and not needing. And in that space, we receive the grace and we receive the gifts that are ours, that are meant to be flowing to us. When I was preparing for today's talk, different thoughts came to me. And one of them was from a sitcom a while back, this show Friends, if you ever saw that, or maybe you know it. But there was this scene where this one couple in the show had just gotten married. And they had a very, that particular day, everything was kind of going wrong. And they were on their way. And they went to the airport to get their airplane ticket, and there was a couple right in front of them who'd just been married that were flowing in grace. Like everything was easeful for them. So the Friends couple, packing was hard, everything was hard. They get to the airport, they're frustrated, and the couple before them are like, oh, you can go before me, there's no rush, everything's fine. They check in and they're upgraded. Like suddenly, oh, you can be upgraded. Oh, wonderful. Like they would have sat anywhere, but upgrade is fine. And the whole show is that this couple's following the other couple. And they really emanated what it is to be in a place of ease, and everything came their way. Right? And so the Friends couple just kept being like, what's wrong with us? And really it was this story about consciousness. Right, in a very humorous way, but it's certainly the teachings, how that can happen, right? The more we're in one state of consciousness, the more that's happening. And when we're in another state of consciousness, something else is happening. So when I am coveting or wishing that I had, I'm in a contracted state of consciousness. I'm very much living in what I don't have. Right? That's what's happening, is that, I'm feeling a sense of less, I'm feeling deprived. I'm wishing that, again, the if only, the if only consciousness of wanting something outside myself. So how does this show up, right? I was thinking about, in real world, how do we work with this? Because I often find, in one sense, the Yamas and Niyamas, again, in the obvious sense, it would be easy to say, oh yeah, well, that's not a problem. I don't need to worry about it. And what I've learned in practicing them is the practice of going deeper and just staying awake and attentive. So one time, here's an example of subtlety, right? Subtlety. When James and I, my husband and I, moved into the Ananda community, I would say within the first month, it was very new of us being here. We were driving somewhere. And as we drove, we happened to be going through Marin, and I don't know where we were going or why, but I was a passenger, he was driving, I was in the car just looking out the window, and I saw this beautiful house kind of nestled in the hills. And as I was looking at it, the thought came to me, I wonder what it would be like to live there. I wonder what that would be like. Now, this was something that I used to enjoy doing, imagining just for play, like, oh, just kind of imagine, what would it be like to have that life? I wonder what that's like. It never felt contractive. It never felt like a problem, never anything. It just was kind of a fun pastime. And it was, I'd have to say, somewhat, I was conscious that I did it, but I never saw anything wrong with it. And it was kind of a happy little daydream. So we're driving, I look up, I see this house, wow, it's this beautiful home. I wonder what that would be like to live there. And immediately I felt within myself a very clear, a very strong, quiet, no more of that. I was like, what? And I could feel within myself, nope, no more of that. You now live in Ananda, and that lifestyle that you're wondering about, you're not going to do that anymore. You are never, really I could feel it, like never, don't do it again. Don't do it again. And so I was reminded, it surprised me for one thing. And then I was reminded of stories I've heard where Asha tells a story that she was with Swamiji. They were at someone's home in Ananda who had a beautiful set of china, and they were having tea together, and Asha talks about taking a sip from this beautiful china cup and having a realization of like, oh, I could see now why people enjoy china, right? That this is kind of lovely to enjoy tea from this. And Swamiji she mentioned it to Swamiji, and he said, be careful. Like, it's surprising. You'd think, aren't I just appreciating a beautiful cup? Yes. But what he said to her, and is that yogis in particular, and again, Swamiji said this, so I'm going to imagine Master said this, Yogananda said this, that when we're on a path of renunciation, which the yogic path is, and we're renouncing the idea that happiness is outside the self. That's really what we're renouncing, and what we're claiming is the joy within. So this path of renunciation seems like giving up, and what it is welcoming, right? The abundance of what we already have, that the world around us leads us to believe we don't have. So what Swamiji was saying to Asha is, at this point in your journey as a yogi, you can expect that you have already enjoyed fine things, and you've realized the limit of them. That more often than not, you've already had a wealth, you've already had these refined things. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying them. That's appropriate to enjoy them. There's another story I might share about Swamiji and tea, China, a beautiful set that he tells a story of. Yeah, maybe I will. But so she tells that story, like, isn't that interesting? And part of what it is nip it in the bud. Right? Just don't go there. And this is a very individual practice for us to be attentive to. It's really not a rules that we want to get bogged down by. That, nothing about the practice is to create a sense of tension in us. That's not the idea. It's wonderful to enjoy things, and nothing wrong with admiring a beautiful home. What I can say to you is there must have been something in that wasn't good for me. And I really associate it with the moving in. We had made a commitment. We knew it. We were very happy to make that commitment. It was a deepening of commitment to the yogic life and the life of living for God alone, right? Which we were already on that journey. So something in that was just saying no more. And that was really the message, no more of that. No more of that. I don't think it was anything, but I knew what it meant. And I did say to James, interesting thing just happened. And I would say, yeah, no more of that. Nope, no more of that. That dropped away. And what I really felt is it was a grace. It was a grace. It was a training of my consciousness, a training of my thoughts, of where to go, where not to go, and a teaching in that moment. Very subtle, incredibly subtle. Also, no sense of wrongdoing, no sense of guilt or heaviness about it. And that's important, because the Yamas and Niyamas, our whole life, the spiritual journey is a remembering of our divine self, and it's a shedding of things that are obscuring that inner light. So we don't need to feel badly about them, right? We just simply, we awaken to no more of that. There's a story a famous story about Gandhi, when a mother came to him about her son and said, my son has a problem with sweets, and I feel that if he could speak with you and you could say to him, don't eat sweets, don't eat sweets or don't eat too many, he would listen to you, Gandhiji. So Gandhi said, come back in a week. She said, okay. So they left. And it came back in a week, and he said, he either said, don't eat sweets or don't eat too many sweets. I don't remember which. And then she was somewhat surprised of why did it need a week? He said, a week ago I was eating too many sweets, which is so lovely, right? And the other part of it, what Gandhi said, is never renounce something without having something higher that you're aspiring to. And I think for myself in this story of no more of that, I had chosen a higher aspiration of livelihood and lifestyle that was the higher aspiration. And really, it's not about what something looks like on the outside. Honestly, I am amazed at how happy I am in a one-bedroom apartment with my husband. And we'll say, wow, it's amazing. You know, we have this little patio. We have it's small, right? It's small. It's a small space, especially sheltering in place where now we're both working from home. We're very aware of how small it is. And you have to really navigate that. So we're getting better and better at navigating. But there is a contentment there because of the vibration of where we live. Where we live is so restorative vibrationally to my consciousness. So that choice removed the other way, right? It just removed it. So no more of that. No need for that. One of my favorite prayers and affirmations from Yogananda is, I will go forth in perfect faith in the power of omnipresent good to bring me that which I need at the time that I need it. This prayer, this affirmation, is really a beautiful expression of Ashteya, of perfect faith, that when we live in that consciousness, that God will bring to us in omnipresent good, right? What we belong to, will bring into our lives that what we need at the time that we need it. And there's such a sense of relaxation that comes with that keeps us open to the flow of grace. From the Gita in chapter 2, verse, let me get to that. Here we are. Verse 62 to 63, it talks about basically what I was saying about catch it in the beginning. So it said, this is how we fall. This is what it says in the Gita. Dwelling mentally on sense objects breeds attachment to them. From attachment arises craving. From craving, when frustrated, springs anger. Anger produces delusion. Delusion causes forgetfulness of the self. Loss of memory as to what one is in truth causes decay of the power of discrimination. From loss of discrimination ensues the annihilation of all right understanding. Very, very powerful. Dwelling mentally on sense objects breeds attachment to them. And this is part of what we want to take very seriously in the practice of non-stealing and non-coveting. That when I'm looking at something in a seemingly innocent way, it may not at all be as innocent as I think that it is. And this is where discrimination comes in, right? An ability, I would say first, a sincerity to live by the Yamas and Niyamas, to have in your life people who are also committed to a spiritual life, whatever that path is. I'm talking from this path reference of yoga and Ananda. To have others in that consciousness helps us stay on track, in part by lifting the vibration that we're in part by observing the choices that they make, in part by having someone to talk to share with, and keeping the channel open for grace to come. So if the thought comes in that I don't have something that I need, and it's hard to not have it, being able to find an affirmation that helps shift that thought, and people to talk to that can help me hold the reality of my life in a way that keeps my consciousness expansive, is so important. So yes, right, that for me has been part of the guiding principle, that I want people in my life who can be sensitive if I'm in a place of hardship, if I'm feeling that things are difficult, and helping me not go to a place of stealing or coveting in my consciousness, but rather to help me affirm I have divine support. And even in this moment of difficulty, my needs are being attended to. And what will help me receive the grace that's being offered is to stay open to that grace. I was speaking with a friend recently about times of difficulty, and one of the challenges egoically is how we can block the grace that might come to us energetically through supportive friends, because the ego feels like a failure and, oh, I don't want others to know I'm having a hard time. So in effect, that warehouse of gifts that's intended, there go our gifts, right, to that place where they were meant to come our way, but egoically, we didn't know how to keep the door open for them. When I was, that's an important part of the practice. Sometimes we are going through a time that is difficult. And in the material realm, my goodness, this can happen. It certainly has happened to me. I've absolutely gone through times where I felt like, wow, this is hard. And, wow, this is hard. Whether that has been a time when I didn't have a partner and I was really feeling a sense of loss, and it wasn't easy to find fullness and fulfillment and to trust the richness that my life was offering me. I remember one time praying to God. I was just feeling such a loss of, how come I can't have a partner, right? So I talked to God about that a lot. I had a lot to learn. And one day in particular, I just in anguish said, is it too much to ask for to have love in my life? Right? I said this out loud to God. And immediately, I'm grateful for this. What came back to me was, your life is full of love. And as soon as I heard that, I saw this panoramic within myself view of all these loving, beautiful, abundant relationships of love in my life. I didn't have a romantic partner. It was true, I wanted one. My life was full of love. And I thought, okay, you're right. My life is full of love. Okay, I want this. I feel like, but really I was being taught something and I could feel it. I really could feel. Yogananda has an expression that where people get into trouble with partnerships or families is a consciousness of us for no more. And honestly, I'll tell you, that sounded good to me back then. That was not my highest self, for heaven's sake. Was not. And not the richness that my life has become, the destiny of my own soul. So I was being expanded. It was being kept from me, I do believe this, until I was ready to have it come in the right way, to take its right place, to not be everything. That's not everything. And really, it would diminish the happiness of the beautiful partnership I have if I was just that partner. That would not be happiness for me. I really know that. And this is the teaching of non-stealing, Ashteya, non-coveting. We are abundant in our nature. Love and joy and peace and calmness, all the qualities of God are our own soul nature. We don't need to look outside ourselves for this. When we live within this consciousness, then that which matches it flows to us easily and naturally. I will go forth in perfect faith in the power of omnipresent good to bring me that which I need at the time that I need it. May we live in that consciousness, and may that be your practice this week, and see what happens. Many blessings to you, great souls. Wonderful to be with you today.